Seth Kaplan. Plus, I wanted to get his take on the FAA's role in all of this, beginning to end. After two deadly crashes, will we see them change their approach this time? Seth, we've read this weekend that Boeing was testing out its new software for safety. Any indication of how that went?
Well, no indication that it went poorly. Boeing said right away that they had a fix, and they seem to have indeed had one. The question here now is, how soon can regulators and airlines get their hands around the idea that they can be comfortable with this fix, that they can be comfortable flying these planes again? Because in the end, you're going to have to convince the public that it's safe to get back on the MAX. And a lot of people, when those planes first go back in the air, are going to be a little more fearful than they usually are nowadays when it comes to flying.
For sure. I mean, even those of us who repeat the data to ourselves while we feel the bumps in the air and thinking it's going to be okay, that if you're on one of these models in, let's say, 6 months, you're going to be extra fearful, and you want to be able to trust the FAA. That gets to another question of how is this scrutiny going of their process? Because in some ways it seems like the fox was guarding the hen house.
Yeah, there's almost no question now that the process had problems. The question now is almost, why was that? Was it just that the FAA was just kind of under-resourced, just kind of outmatched, that companies like, well, Boeing, had the resources to hire the best engineering talent, and the FAA was doing its best? Or was it something more than that? Whether it was something, and there's all kinds of scrutiny right now, where Boeing really was trying to get the FAA to look the other way, or some combination maybe of that, and just the FAA looking at Boeing as this great industrial champion, the biggest exporter in the U.S., and the fact that it doesn't really have a domestic competitor. The engines that hang on planes, they might be built by GE or Pratt & Whitney, both U.S. companies, and if the FAA or any regulators seem to be doing favors for one, the other would complain. But when it comes to Boeing, there's kind of nobody domestically to complain.
Canada, I think, has put a moratorium on this for like 7 months, whereas the U.S. is something like April 24th, I believe. When do you expect, and I understand that prediction is hard, for these to actually be in the air again and allowed in places like Canadian airspace and other countries?
Right, you're right. Just looking at sort of airline schedules, airlines through their actions, you can kind of see what they're thinking. A lot of them kind of taking the plane out of their schedules for several months, which they wouldn't do if you wouldn't want to do the same work twice. You wouldn't change the schedules if you thought they were going to change back. Easily we're talking months, broadly speaking. And I don't mean to hedge. I don't know what the exact answer is going to be.
But it seems that the FAA and Boeing would not want to be forced into this like they were forced into taking these planes out of the sky.
Exactly. And they're going to have to build that credibility. And that's something they have to be doing now, so that when they say, okay, this thing's okay, the world believes it again. Canada, by the way, is a country, what's interesting, in addition to sort of the stand they've taken, it's among big countries, sizable countries anyway, the country that's kind of affected most by the grounding, just in terms of the percentage of their fleet that's made up of MAXs. And so there's that too. So if Canada's saying, let's not fly the planes, I mean, they're doing that knowing that they are impacting their airlines much more than a U.S. airline, an airline like, let's say, United, which has 13 or 14 of these planes out of 750 planes. Their schedule, they didn't even notice the impact. Southwest and American a little more, but Air Canada, WestJet, the big low-cost carrier, budget carrier up in Canada, a different story for them.
Public trust, it's going to be critical. A few more headlines we're watching now. President Trump met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the Oval Office today. During that meeting, the president signed a proclamation recognizing the Golan Heights as part of Israel officially. It's an area once contested by Syria and Israel, but now mostly considered Israeli territory. Syria, though, insists any peace agreement with Israel must return the territory. Netanyahu praised the president as he was reaffirming strong U.S. support for Israel.
In the long sweep of Jewish history, there have been a handful of proclamations by non-Jewish leaders on behalf of our people in our land. Cyrus the Great Persian king, Lord Balfour, President Harry S. Truman, and President Donald J. Trump.
Under my administration, the unbreakable alliance between the United States and Israel has never been stronger. You read things, you hear things. It's never been stronger. Just remember that. People talk, but it's only talk. Our relationship is